for this DCF stuff sack, I wanted to take a couple of ideas or a couple of things that Z-Packs uses, and when they make their stuff sacks, I've always been really happy with their stuff sacks. They last a really long time, and I really like them. So I wanted to kind of use their style when I was making this for you. So the first thing that I really like about it is that they don't have any kind of fold over seam or opening for the opening where the draw cord comes out. I always felt like that was a kind of bad point on a stuff sack for failure. So what they do is they actually use a 2.92 patch on the inside of the fold for the top channel, and then they punch a hole in it, and the draw cord comes out of that at the halfway point. So your center seam is on the back, and then directly around from that you have your patch with your draw cord hole coming out there, and I think it just makes for a stronger stuff sack overall. So that's one of the things that I'm going to be using. The second thing I'm going to be using that's from the Z-Pack style is the way they fold the bottom of the stuff sack. So I've always liked that their stuff sacks are boxed off at the end. Now when they fold their stuff sacks, they do a kind of both sides folded to the end, and then they do a roll hem at the bottom, and it creates this little box that's just, it's super simple. It's a really strong way to box out the bottom of a stuff sack, so I've always liked that. Another thing that I've kind of decided on already is the size sack. So I've got just an extra pair of clothes in here right now, but it will fit a tarp. Another thing I really like about the size of this bag is that if you fill it up with your extra clothes and you're like me, you carry a buff, then once it's full, you can slide your buff over it and it makes a nice soft pillow. So that's what I'm going with. Let me set the camera up and I'm going to show you how I make it. I'm going to start with a piece of 0.51 ounce per square yard Cuben fiber or Dyneema composite fabric. It's going to be 19 inches wide and 12¼ inches tall. So that's taking into consideration the seam allowance that I'm going to need and anything that I need for my cinch cord channel at the top of the bag and the boxed out closure for the bottom of the bag. And I'm basically just using a square here to mark out a rectangle for the size of the material that I need so that I can get it cut out. All right, so moving over to my desk, it is very simple to cut through this material with just a standard razor blade. So I basically lay out the material and then I cut in the same direction and keep my body in the same position the whole time, and I move the fabric around to be able to kind of keep that position. That way I can just make nice straight cuts and get everything even and keep it looking good. So I'm going to go ahead and just trim up the second cut and probably just skip forward to you get the gist of it. So all right, here we are with our piece of Cuben we need for the stuff sack. First thing we're going to do is just on the long end, the 19-inch long end, we're going to roll down a 1/4 inch fold at the top, and what that's going to do is that's just going to hide our raw end on the inside of the cinch cord channel. Then it's flip the material over and fold it in half, and what this is going to do is give us our first kind of look at the size of the stuff sack. And so that raw edge of the 1/4 inch fold we did just a minute ago is now on the outside, and we have a double layer up down the 12¼ inch long end so that we can actually form the tube of the stuff sack. So I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine now and just have everything lined up. Now when I'm starting on a material that is a thinner Cuben like this, I generally start rolling my needle forward 3 or 4 times just to make sure that I have a good large amount of material underneath the feed dog. Then I'll go ahead and reverse my stitch to lock it in and continue to sew down the entire seam. So it's not a hard thing to do. It's just a process of keeping everything lined up as you're moving through it. So now we've got the stuff sack closed up on that end. The next thing to do is going to be to roll down the cinch cord channel, and we want that to be about 1/2 inch. That way we have plenty of room to sew the bottom of the channel around, and there's no restrictions or limitations for the cord kind of sliding through there, and it's not too much material that it bunches up a lot, and it's just enough that it allows the cord to slide through there easily. So I'm just kind of working my way around and folding everything down in a uniform 1/2 inch thickness, and dressing up the stitch line there where I have that small piece of material that's hanging over. And now it's going to be time to add the reinforcement at the corner for, or at, excuse me, not the corner, the center line there. I use a patch of 2.92 dynamic composite fabric. I pick it up from Z-Packs, and basically all I'm going to do is cut out a 1/2 inch square of this material. Using a ruler here, you can just kind of eyeball it and get your lines for your square nice and even, and I'll show you here. So with marking this material with a pencil, you can see that it gives plenty of visual to be able to see where you're cutting, but it's not permanently changing the fabric. So I like using the pencil when marking this black patch. All right, so I'm going to just finish trimming up this 1/2 inch piece, and then easy thing to do to find the center, I'm going to just fold it in half there and crease it. That way I can line that crease up with the crease for the halfway point on the stuff sack. And here I'm just going to change the orientation of the fold on the stuff sack so that it allows me to access the center of the channel at the top and make sure that I get that reinforcement patch in the right position. So basically I've lined up the center of the bag with the hem on the back, and I'm going to just fold the cinch cord channel up a little bit, and I'm going to take this small patch that I've cut out and place it right in the middle so that when the cinch cord channel folds down, it covers the patch completely, and it gives you a nice finished look on the outside edge where that reinforcement is. So that's something that I picked up and I think looks really nice. So now it's time to close up the cinch cord channel, and I'm going to just start at the seam in the back and lock the stitch in and take my time and slowly work around the basically tube shape at this point, and making sure that I'm keeping my stitches nice and even, and all the material I'm using both hands so that I can make sure that the material stays tight and does not bunch or get in any kind of weird position. Next step will be to tape the original seam that created the tube for our stuff sack here, and I'm going to just use a strip of Cuben tape. It is a repair tape. It's a reinforcement tape. I mean, this stuff works wonders. It does really well. I've always had good luck with it. I pick it up from Z-Packs in a 54-inch section, and it's pretty inexpensive. I want to say it's around $5 for this piece. And basic technique that I have when I'm putting this down is I'll use one hand to slide the backing off of it with my thumb, and as I'm sliding the backing off of it with that thumb, I can feel where my stitch line is, and that just keeps me on track so that I keep it nice and even. And then with the other hand, I just follow along and make sure everything stays nice and tight, and then a little bit of focus to make sure everything's pushed down. Next step is going to be to just sew a 1/4 inch seam down the very bottom of the stuff sack and close that up so that it's ready to go to set the box. Now this is one of Z-Packs' stuff sacks, and basically you can see that they fold each side in at the bottom and then do a rolled hem, and that's what creates their boxed out closure on the bottom of their stuff sacks. So on this size stuff sack, from the center seam, they go about 1 inch, maybe just a little less, from that center seam to where they fold that each side in. So I've made a small mark at the seam line, and
I'm folding each side in, and then now I just want to take some care to roll the bottom edge up. It is a raw edge, so I want to get it nice and rolled up because there are multiple layers, and I want everything to look even and be strong and no layers to get missed when I'm sewing up this bottom hem. So after I roll it over the one time, make sure everything's lined up. I'll roll it over one more time just to make sure I have a nice finished edge on there, and then I'm going to just lock it in by running a seam straight down the center of that roll, and lock everything up at the bottom, and basically you have a finished stuff sack. Our seam is nice and strong, taped for reinforcement. We'll pull the bag inside out here and go ahead and check out how our boxed off ends came out at the bottom, and make sure everything looks good, which it certainly did. Now it's going to be time to go ahead and punch our hole in the top cinch cord to make sure we can easily get our cord through that cinch cord channel we made. I use a just standard hole punch that you can pick up at Office Depot, and I punch a hole in there. Sometimes I have to take some scissors and just trim out a couple of extra fibers that didn't get completely severed with the hole punch. Here I'm just showing that I'm taking care to pay attention to what side my hem rolls over on the side of the stuff sack. In the channel, I want to make sure that I'm easing through there and not getting caught up on anything. I used to do some leather work, so I have some needles from some leather binding that I've done when making knife sheaths and things like that. I use a 1mm polyester cord, and it's easily threaded through the needle, and then I just kind of run it through the channel. It's kind of an inchworm technique that I like to use, and as I make my way around, the needle slides out of that opening in the cinch cord channel very easily. I'm going to pick out my cord lock now. I like to go with a micro cord lock. There's also a mini cord lock, but I feel like the micro does better with a 1mm polyester cord that we use for the cinch cords on these bags. So I'm going to just gather up my two pieces of cord here, slide them into the cord lock, and kind of wrestle around with it a little bit, of course, because everything's so small. And then I'm going to throw an easy overhand knot in this, and just, you know, take a little bit of care to go ahead and dress up my knot and make sure that everything's even and everything's tightened down, and I'm not going to get any kind of slippage or get the knot coming loose or failing at any point. I'll flame treat the ends of the cord, and we're ready to go.